Here. Okay. Refresh this. I'm getting a video unavailable. Video has been removed by the uploader.
We are live on YouTube.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, YouTube.
It is the link. It has to be.
Okay, so the one we had yesterday is working for today?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'll send this over. So sorry, Asha. Sorry for the...
Oh, we're chilling. I'm just drinking my coffee. This is
Love it.
I'm in a good spot.
Fantastic. If you're in a good spot, we're in a good spot. Minus the massive technological failures. But other than that, it's fine.
Well, on the plus side, this will still be live recorded on your YouTube page. We still have audio going. So there's going to be a good podcast out of this regardless of anything.
Yep. That's the most important part, really. Okay. Is there any way to put up that image, Ian?
I can do this. Oops, that's not helping anything. I did put that as my background, but it looks like when I turn my camera off, it just turns my camera off. It doesn't even go to a screen. So, let's see what I can do here. And that kind of just, yeah. I can do this where it's got that logo in the background, but it's just on mine. And it's had to be zoomed in. It wouldn't let me take the whole thing. Can I project a still?
Email it to me, I can try to resize it quick.
I think I found a way we can do this. Does that look better? Should just.
Of course, I have about 14,000 tabs open, so it takes me 10
Right.
hours to find
I
what
just
I'm looking for.
sure this looks like kind of like everybody's just seeing the full.
Oh, yeah. That looks great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to change the settings back to. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yasha.
How's it going? Tree?
Correct. I'm doing
Fantastic.
well. Yourself?
Awesome. Doing well. We are attempting to iron out some technical difficulties, but
Sure.
we're getting there right now, and we will be starting in just a few. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Really appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Oh, computers. I love you so much and I hate you so much. Computers. Why must you do me like this? Just in case. So basically what's happening, just to explain right now, is we're live streaming through YouTube and then sending that to the Twin Cities Startup Week platform called Hopin. And the the connection between the YouTube and Hopin is not connected right now. So I've sent an email to technical side on their end and trying to get that updated so the link goes live and everything goes live for Twin Cities Startup Week. But if all else fails, we're recording right now. So we'll record this locally on our end and then release it as a podcast later in the fall. So it won't be just like 4 people talking to each other and not be used. So it'll definitely be promoted and sent out into the world in some form. I'm really sorry about the technical difficulties that we're having right now. It was not part of the plan, but
No, they never are. You're so good. No worries.
all right. Oh, sweet background. That's awesome. Okay, we'll wait just a few more minutes and see if Kelly on TCSW can update that link. Otherwise, we'll just get started and we'll have a good chat if that's okay. Cool.
Are you guys just seeing the title up here? Or are you seeing like my junky desktop screen as well?
Just the title.
Awesome.
Yeah, ditto.
So basically, when I know here, I'll turn my video on so you can see me. I'll basically turn the title screen off when we decided to start the interview, and then we'll pop it back on when we're done, and it should be good to go. And even though, like Alex said, we're we're working with Hopin and YouTube right now. If you do mess up, or if you want to say, wait, I want to say that a different way or something, just go ahead and do that. We're taking notes throughout the whole podcast. So at least in the final audio version, we can make a cleaned up version. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
There. Not so much sunlight on my fair Norwegian skin. All right. All right, Ian. I'll keep paying attention to my email here and seeing if Kelly can work that out, but I don't want to waste anybody's time more than we've already wasted. So we can get started.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. Whenever you guys want to start, we'll get started. We'll layer in some music before and after this in post. So just go ahead and roll whenever you're ready.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Let me just move my coffee. All right. Oh, I lost everyone.
We're still here. We're still here.
We're still here.
God, I'm so lost. There we go. All right. Back in action. Here we go. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to what was supposed to be a live stream on Twin Cities Startup Week 2020. Technical difficulties. What are you going to do? But we are here anyway, and I'm very excited to be here with the first two guests of the entire live podcast booth. Green Card Voices. They've done more than 400 stories from more than 120 countries across the globe: Jamaica, Laos, Kenya, India, Iceland. Truly a global connection that they're forging over there. We are very lucky to have two representatives from Green Card Voices. We have Asha Thanki and Trivo. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah, our pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So let's just get started. Green Card Voices is new to me. When I was looking for guests for the podcast, I came across you, and I was really impressed by the work that you've been doing, connecting so many different voices in a first person way, and really getting into the root and the depth of each of the stories that they have to tell. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me initially is that on your website, and I have my nice little notes up here, very analog, very cool. It says that you thought podcasting was an effective method to get an authentic first-person stories of immigrants to as many people as possible. And I was just wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit and kind of talk about why podcasting is the preferred method for this type of storytelling, and why it's perfect for getting these kind of stories out into the world.
Asha, I'll go ahead. And just a disclaimer about the two of us, we were both interns, and I have only worked with Green Card Voices since January. My contract only went till June, and we got extended till October. So for us, Our experience with Green Card Voices has been a very rewarding one, but also limited one. But to answer the question about podcasts, I've been listening to podcasts for several years. I am a podcast omnivore. Just even today, I listen to sometimes 5 to 10 episodes of things per day of various topics. And I think the thing about podcasts, it's almost it's the most modern, it's the contemporary version of oral storytelling, of the oldest tradition of imparting stories to neighbors, your family, and warning them about, possible conflicts in the world, as well as places where you go to break bread with people, to be in community with people, and the stories are, you get to hear people's voices, and you don't have to worry too much about you know knowing anything beside hearing the stories in an audible way. And so, I mean, sometimes, actually, no, I'm going to pause there. I have more stuff, but Asha, you have thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think what I want to add is, so as podcast manager for our latest series, the Beyond Allyship series, I think something that was really great about having a podcast format was, we have these books and we have these old recordings. And for a long time, that was our initial season of the podcast, was having those stories put into a podcast, like an episodic format, so that people could listen to it. But with the Love Your Asian Neighbor series, which Tree spearheaded, and the Beyond Allyship series, which was under my purview, we really had the opportunity to live interview guests. We were able to get not only their stories, but how they related to the current political context in the US, right? Like whether we're talking about coronavirus and xenophobia, or whether we're talking about, police murders of Black men, like all of being able to have these conversations within the context of the immigrants that we always elevate and the stories that we're telling. I think it was really important to have a podcast format to kind of intertwine those two. It gave us a chance to do a little bit more, I think, than what having recordings, that are great and that are on YouTube, that are, transcribed in books, but we wanted to do more with it, like connect it to this, to whatever moment we're living in at that time. So I think that was actually like one of the great benefits of having a podcast series.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the 2 different series, the Love Your Asian Neighbors, I believe it's called, and then the Beyond Allyship. And you said that each of those was kind of spearheaded by the 2 of you. Were those 2 projects that you came up with on your own and said, hey, we have these ideas, we really want to do these? Because I noticed after going through the feed a little bit that a lot of the content was focused on individual stories from individuals in the community. And then recently, very recently, actually, you've kind of broken off and kind of started developing this kind of branch work of different series that are going forward. So could you talk about the inception of those individual series and where those ideas came from and how they've been going so far?
Right. And I think the first thing that you mentioned about the first season, Green Card Voice, the podcast idea was kind of very spontaneous for Taya, the executive director. Last November, she launched the podcast in downtown St. Paul. And the first season wasn't necessarily going to be like a long running series where Green Card Voices would adapt old interviews in the archive for a podcast format. And that's why we had our host Mahalet. She was the one who was guiding listeners through a posture of listening to these stories of immigrants and refugees who already interviewed with us, sometimes 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and these stories that we've already heard, but are adapting for the podcast format. Moving into COVID, for me as an intern who is Southeast Asian, I was noticing the what I call Sino adjacent attitudes, and Sino being Chinese, because I can get into this, but I mostly saw a lot of negative attitudes against people who were similar to Chinese people because of how COVID has been perceived. And so I wanted to spotlight the positive things that Asians have contributed to communities, both in a movement way, also a spiritual way, also a personal community-based way. And a lot of the people that I interviewed were people I knew. And yeah, to Asha's point about the political moment, a lot of the stories in the first season with Mahalet at the host were archived for for these 2 seasons, we were able to have people speak directly to this political moment, not just political moment, but the moment itself of the pandemic and of the uprisings and unrest. And that allowed for more candidness, more forthrightness around talking about things that are immediate and sensitive. And I think it was really great to have those conversations.
Yeah. And then with Beyond Allyship, it kind of came about a slightly different way. So when I came on as podcast manager, I'm bringing with me like a background in public policy and really wanted to do something focused on civic participation, right? Like was really focused on immigration advocacy. I do some work around asylum. So really wanted to bring those kinds of my like background passions with me to the podcast. And, you know, we were drafting memos around a civic participation series, and then George Floyd was murdered. And our question was, how can we bring our audience into this conversation? How can we, you know, we know that our audience are many times, you know, Twin Cities immigrants. We know that there are folks across the country and across the world who listen to the podcast, but, you know, primarily we are based in Twin Cities, we are Minneapolis. Like, how do we bring our immigrant audience into a conversation that, you know, we are ready to put everything else aside for in order to participate in the movement for Black lives? And so, you know, we had this kind of background of, okay, we had a civic participation series. How can we take that structure? How can we make sure that we're talking to different folks who are immigrants, who are, you know, who are involved in the fight and the movement for Black lives in different ways and having different conversations with their communities? And how can we use those as blueprints for listeners if they're not sure how they can get more involved, or they're not sure how they can be better, you know, they can go beyond allyship to stand as in co-conspiratorship, as, you know, 18 Million Rising has coined the term. How can we get them to do more than just call themselves allies? And so that was really where the Beyond Allyship podcast, you know, sprouted from.
Yeah, that's interesting. One thing, 2020 has been a hell of a year, and it's certainly not. Obviously, all of these issues are pervasive, and they've spread out for years and decades and centuries. But it has felt especially focused and troubling in the past 10 months or whatever. And one thing that I've seen, and for anybody not watching this, I am super duper white. I am as white as they come. So one thing that I've seen and has been eye-opening to me is that people saying it's not enough to be not racist anymore. It's not enough to be not racist anymore. You have to be anti-racist. And I think that people who have, you know, who aren't racists and don't know how to take that next step, that's a really interesting thing to hear from you, kind of providing almost and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but providing almost like a playbook or some advice, some helpful steps, some actionable advice that people who want to do more than to just say, yes, I'm for this movement. You know, you're providing kind of a couple steps that maybe people can take to take their allyship to the next level. Is that right?
Well, yeah, like every episode we were speaking with, you know, campaign managers or executive directors of institutions that have been in this fight for longer than many of us have been alive, right? Mm-hmm. And so hearing from folks who have invested their entire lives, all of their time, all of their passion into this movement, having them say, what do you think? Like having them say, this is a way you can get involved. This is what we need from you. This is the way to stand with us, is important. I think a lot of folks, you know, as they try to do that, like, they're like, oh, I'm not racist. I want to be anti-racist. What do I do? They come up with, they're like, I don't know how to best do what I'm supposed to do, or I don't even know what the best way to get involved is. And I will say that I think, you know, a lot of the Beyond Allyship series, and Tree, totally correct me if I'm wrong, this is maybe my perception, I don't think they were geared necessarily towards, you know, US born white folks. Because I think what we wanted to talk about was, you know, what does it mean? Like for me, I'm a brown woman of color. You know, I face marginalization in many ways, and I have privilege in many ways. There is a nuance to that placement within the United States. There is class privilege, caste privilege. There is, you know, there's so many things that go into that, you know, when we're talking to a specific audience that was generally of immigrant folks to the US, that conversation is sometimes more complicated. People have different ways of like inroads to that conversation. But at the end of the day, we were saying, these are examples of folks from maybe your community who have been leading this fight and standing in solidarity with Black folks. And like, how can you, kind of jumpstart those conversations or, be an agent of change in that way?
Right. So the kind of inspiration to do more, to kind of spotlight these people who are doing more to hopefully inspire other people to also do more. Right? Is that right?
Yeah,
I said more about 10,000 times there, but I think I was on kind of a right track maybe. With both of you going out and well, maybe not so much going out anymore given COVID, and we'll touch on that, but from the Minnesota perspective, I've grown up here all my life. I've lived in a couple different places. I lived in Chicago for a little bit and in Atlanta for a little bit, but born and raised in Minnesota. And every time I say boat, it comes out and I cringe a little bit. It's ridiculous. But there's a tendency, well, at least the white Minnesotan background, the Scandinavian background, is a tendency to downplay everything. Very, very modest. Like, oh, it's not that big a deal. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So it's been really interesting and eye-opening and heartbreaking and heartening in certain ways for Minneapolis and Minnesota all of a sudden to be thrust upon the global scene, with this awful spark point of George Floyd's death, for this incredible new movement that's going on. And obviously, I can't say enough that it's nothing new, unfortunately, but it was such a broadcast event that kind of set fire to the world almost. So for you, both of you going out and talking to the people who have been involved in these movements and involved in the actions that have been going on, how has it felt to be kind of a much more of a part of that story than maybe someone who's just like watching the news every night or watching things go out on Twitter? And you've been going out and talking to the people who have been ingrained in these communities and ingrained in these movements. So I think, from my perspective, you're connected to kind of what's going on at the heart of this, at least a little bit, a degree more than someone who's not going out and talking to these people and getting their stories. So how has it felt to both of you personally to kind of experience that kind of secondhand through these firsthand stories? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say, a lot of these stories, especially with the Loved Your Asian Neighbors series, a lot of these people are my friends, except for a couple of them who were acquaintances of mine, and I reached back to see, hey, would you like to talk about this? And then we actually, through the podcast series, I was able to develop more of a friendship with people because it became an alibi of sorts for me to say, let's talk more, let's develop these ideas, and then also develop friendship along the way. So I think the movement has allowed for people who have an affinity towards talking about things like politics, power, and such, to come together and to actually build relationships through that as a point of affinity, right? A couple things I wanted to mention earlier about, because you said about talking about more, like we're doing more of this and seeing more of this. I think one thing since the Bernie moment of 2016 and leading into this, I've been realizing that framing matters. It's not just about more of anything, but it's more about how you frame the idea of anti-racism. Anti-racism in the context of what powers racism in the first place that we need to fight against it. And so on the podcast, especially on Beyond Allyship, we've been more intentional about talking about things like labor and how political economic models like capitalism work. These are big ideas, but when you sit down and do the sort of logical step-by-step math of it, anyone can understand it, because it's about how people are exploited and all these concepts I don't need to get into right now. But the idea is framing matters for us to make sure that we aren't fighting one thing, but falling into the trap of perpetuating another thing. And I think that's one thing that happens with anti-racism work sometimes. The movement for Black Lives is specifically, and we have to be intentional about our language here, it's specifically about police brutality, but it doesn't necessarily have, but But police brutality is an extension of capitalism if we sat down to think about it. And how we address that requires us to use specific language and to build specific kinds of collective power. And I think the framework that we're trying to build for, at least, it started with Love Your Asian Neighbors, but swelled more with Beyond Allyship, is to build a posture of curiosity, of robust curiosity around these topics, so that people don't think, because Beyond Allyship usually it's merely about racism. Okay, not merely, but like, well, I do mean merely in the sense of you don't talk about all the other things that power racism. So sometimes if you don't talk about that, then your movement building can be ineffectual. That's why allyship, we kind of think of allyship as people who come out and wear a shirt that says Black Lives Matter and march, but then they don't like do public policy work. They don't phone their elected officials. They don't do things beyond electoralism.
Right.
And so, yeah.
It becomes kind of, and I feel gross saying this word, but it always becomes kind of trendy in the moment to wear BLM or you know, like post that like Blackout Tuesday on Instagram. That was a big thing. And that was, you know, I even fell into the trap of doing that and feeling like, oh, look at me, post a black square on my Instagram page. Like I did good that day. And then I see, you know, people saying, don't hashtag it with Black Lives Matter, because like messages need to get out, and the entire feed is just being this black square. So, you know, it's an easy rabbit hole for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or you know, kind of wants to be trendy anti-racist, which again, all these things that I'm saying are making me feel like gross and making my skin crawl. But
no, but Alex, I think you're right. Like, I think that is part of what we were, when Tree and I were talking so much about how we were going to set up this series. I think we knew that a lot of what you know might be happening for a lot of, you know, young white Minnesotans was that performative allyship. And when that is what allyship is, what does it mean to need something that goes beyond it? You know, what does it mean to create something that says you have capital? Can you give that capital to the movement? You have time or labor that you can provide. Why don't you give that to the movement? You have, you know, for Tree and I as just podcast, you know, manager and hosts, like for what this podcast series, and I want to include Love Your Asian Neighbors in this, what these two series did, I think was, you know, if we have this space under our hands, what does it mean to give that space to topics that, you know, affect the communities that Green Card Voices is focused on, for sure, but also something that, you know, is maybe never being talked about enough. And there's no such thing as being talked about enough, I think, with both of these spaces. And I want to say that I think this is maybe my hot take, is that, you know, Minnesota, I'm a new Minnesota resident. I've only been in Minneapolis for about a year now. And I came from St. Louis and DC. And I think, you know, and especially coming from St. Louis, the year I left St. Louis, 2 years later was when Mike Brown was murdered by the police. I think there's an interesting thing in being in Minneapolis during this time, which is, you know, Minnesota nice is sometimes passive aggressive racism. And so when, you know, that's not even a hot take. I think that's just like my take. And I think that, you know,
that's a room temperature take, because I think it's dead on.
Yeah, I think I'm like, I refuse to think that this is actually controversial. But I think, you know, when we're having conversations with folks in this context of being in this state, and, you know, on one hand, it's like, yes, there are going to be white Minnesotans who listen to this podcast and are like, whoa, this is a lot. I think we just always geared ourselves toward, what does our audience need? If our audience needs, and I want to just echo what Tree is saying, if our audience needs to learn about the connections between capitalism and exploitation and the treatment of Black lives in the US today, we can take them through that. And we will call on experts in this space to give that, like, here is the history. Let's lay it out. Let's talk about what it looks like today. Let's talk about where it comes from. And then how do you then not see the world in this particular lens? And that was just so important. And we were just always so geared towards that audience. And I think that is honestly, there aren't many places in the US where you find a podcast that is geared towards the immigrant community. There aren't many places where you find folks who are putting their interest or their perspectives first, you know, like hosts really take a back seat in both of these podcasts. And I think that's actually the best way we could have done it.
how do you find, as hosts of these podcasts, how have you managed to balance, providing context to the comments of your interviewees, and guiding the conversation, not necessarily to a point, but keeping it on track or anything like that, while allowing the person to fully voice their opinions? And actually, as I'm saying that, I want to take 1 second as a little bit of a technical update. We are live on Twin Cities Startup Week 2020. We did it, y'all. We did it. So thank you, Kelly Buell, on TCSW side, for updating that link. Much
Thanks,
love.
Kelly.
Fantastic. And for anybody just joining us, this is the Tech.mn live podcast booth for Twin Cities Startup Week 2020. We are doing a little bit something different than the Tech.mn podcast, the flagship one. We're talking to audio and video creators out in the community, creating a wealth of content on a wide range of different topics. Right now, we have Trivo and Asha Thanki from Green Card Voices, Love Your Asian Neighbors series, and Beyond Allyship series. And we're talking about lots of stuff, folks, lots of things. So back to my original question, now that I got that little channel identification notification out. How have you found kind of allowing people to talk as hosts, but keeping that balance? Because at the end of the show, you are producing a show, you are producing an episode, so there has to be a little bit of structure to it. There has to be a little bit of guidance to it. But I imagine that when you're talking to people about these pretty sensitive topics and pretty important topics, but topics with a lot of gravity, that it, at least from my perspective, it would be difficult. You don't want to tread on anybody's toes. You don't want to overstep anybody. You don't want to talk over them. You don't want to do anything like that. So how have you found that balance as like a host in your host roles?
Well, I'll speak to Beyond Allyship a little bit because it was basically co-hosted by Mahalet and myself. And when we were going into every episode, we had our structure of, a page of questions that we'd love to use to guide the conversations. And they changed week by week, especially depending on folks' backgrounds and, their specific relationship to activism, whether it was art and activism, whether it was spirituality and activism, like whatever they were approaching their work with, we wanted to reflect that. That being said, Mahalet and I texted each other during the entire episode. We were kind of doing the same COVID recording we're doing now, right? Like on Zoom, the ability to kind of like sneakily send a text below the video screen to cut questions out as it came, or to say, hey, can we also dive deeper into that? But then I think two things were important to that. So first, Mahalet and I slowly kind of warmed up to the idea of sharing a little bit more about ourselves and our backgrounds and the conversations we were having with our communities and the things that made us passionate about the different organizing that we do. And then the second thing, and so that made a conversation, right? And then the second thing is we left space, we kept time at the end of every recording session that was basically a question of, raise voice to whatever you want to raise voice to. We won't cut this section. You want to speak to this specific action coming up. You want to speak to these events happening, these rallies, this legislation you should be following, or just ways for people to get involved. Do it. And at that point, we were like, there are things that we shouldn't have to edit out. And I think whenever you kind of get to the end of the conversation in any of these episodes from Beyond Allyship, you hear the question asked, and then nothing from there is edited beyond a breath pause. Mm-hmm. It's just whatever folks wanted to put on the table and say. And I think that is really important when you're talking about material where you have an expert with you and you're not the expert and they know so much more than you. Like take that, like have that humility and just give them the space to raise voice to whatever needs to be raised,
Mm-hmm. Tree, do you have anything to add about you being a host, your experiences?
Yeah, briefly, because I basically set off on turning Green Card Voices, the podcast, into an interview-based series because we needed something that is instantly responsive to what we were doing right now in the interview mode was the best. And it seemed like such a long time ago now, even though it's only been, 3 months? But the format for that series...
Time doesn't matter anymore. It's been completely... Who knows what year it is anymore? Whew.
I'm an old man at this point, and you're a new baby. You've had from your cocoon. Who knows what's happening evolutionary wise?
No, up is down. Everything's crazy.
Okay. So for that format, as a marketing person, I was their social media intern, but I am in marketing broadly. I was trying to tie in the podcast with some of the other products that Green Card Voices has, since we do sell things. And we have this card game called Story Stitch, which is a great conversation card game that allows people to consensually, once you consent to playing the game, like share vulnerable stories about your lives through these questions. And I adapted that as the questions for the series because I wanted to spotlight that Asian Americans are not like foreigners, right? The idea of the perpetual foreigner. And the questions allowed for people to share like the very human stories, not humanize them because they're already human, but to allow them to show that they are people who do people things in peoply ways. And I was the host doing that. And to Asha's point about letting the people speak, I think it was more important. I'm not gonna say more important, but it was especially important because this was more about like personal stories. These people were experts in their fields, but at the same time, the goal of my series was to show that these people garden, these people walk their dogs, these people have really funny dad jokes, and if I interject on that, it's bad. And a lot of the guest model that we've had for both series, each guest have most of the episodes, the guests already know each other. They have a camaraderie that allows them to be more candid, more transparent about in jokes or other sort of shared knowledges that they already have, and then hearing that is a breath of fresh air to see people who know each other and have been partners in movement work and scholarly work and other labor. And I'm really glad that was the model that we kicked off with that has extended into Beyond Allyship.
Very cool. Very cool. Switching gears a little bit. 2020 has been a disaster of a year. I think everybody can, most people can agree on that. How has it been for you two, personally? I think everybody has their own kind of stories about, I remember back in the pre-COVID era, it's all drenched in sepia tone and wonderful and beautiful. I remember the week before things got really intense and kind of hearing it just bubble and bubble and bubble and bubble. And then all of a sudden I went from being in the office every day to being at home every day. And, it just feel like it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I think it's taken a real mental toll on everybody, and I think those echoes will kind of reverberate for an unseen amount of time, an unknown amount of time. It's going to be very interesting to see how this whole experience has shaped, young people and us and everybody. So I kind of just want to have a lighthearted conversation about a global pandemic, huh? Yeah, I'm not sure if that's possible, but just kind of talk about how it's been for you this year and within the boundaries of Green Card Voices and doing the show without, anything like that, just kind of whatever you're comfortable sharing. Just how has it been? How have you guys been holding up?
Okay. I'd say I've been with my parents. I lived since 2019 to April of this year. I lived the first time like on my own, mostly because my friend Tony, who's a really cool dude, he invited me to live in his place in Uptown, Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and that was a good time. And then I moved back in with my parents in April, like because the lease was over. And I think the timing was, wow, who would have predicted this? And so I've been able to, I guess, save money or whatever the word is, because I guess I'm focused on that. Anyhow, going back to my family situation, I've always had like a rough situationship with my family, kind of the black sheep in a lot of ways. Here's a funny joke. My mom thinks I hate white people because like I talk about whiteness so much and blah blah blah, and I don't know. There are these conversations that it's hard to. Okay, I can't get into this. As soon as I will dig myself into a bad verbal tunnel but since then I've also had the opportunity to read a lot of books, to do these cohorts, because everyone's trying to figure things out, and they want to figure things out in community. And there are groups like the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. They have this annual cohort that I was a part of to talk with other Asian folks who do their own thing and are real movers and shakers, and that was good. I was also part of this puppetry cohort that COVID had to change stuff, but I was able to make a puppet show and still be in community with creative folks.
Cool.
I did some improv online with an local improv group that has a strong diversity type program. So I was able to be nourished both in community based ways, in both like more, moment specific stuff, themes, as well as, creative stuff that does not need to be tied directly to the moment. And that has sustained me.
I'm super mega ultra interested in the puppet. What can you explain what that was and talk about the puppetry a little bit? I think that sounds super cool.
Sure. Briefly, there's this group called Monkey Bear Productions, hosted by Chamindika Wandaragala. She can tell me how to pronounce her last name, but Chamindika, she's been doing this puppetry thing or doing this thing where she has Black, Indigenous, and people of color folks do puppets through scholarships. So we get paid to make these puppets. And to do this, learn how to do puppets. It's which includes not just like hand puppets, but also rod puppets, face puppetry, shadow puppetry, all these kinds of puppetry that your regular person who watches Sesame Street wouldn't know about, or at least identify. And so it was really fun. I made a puppet show about these batteries who who couldn't pay their bills, and so the lights went out, so they had to like sell coins, and there's a spaceship involved, and then learning about how small you are in the universe, but how you belong to something so much bigger in 5-6 minutes. And then all these other like really cool shows, really some creative people, man. So I recommend, if you're in Minneapolis, check out Monkey Bear Productions, check out Heart of the Beast Theater. I don't know where they're at in their sort of their existence right now, but those are two places to check out for that.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll put a link to all that stuff in the show notes for sure, and we'll get it out there. That sounds awesome. And explaining the existential crisis of finding a place in the universe in 5 or 6 minutes sounds incredibly daunting. So I laud you for that, for sure, with spaceships and batteries and all that stuff. Asha, how about you? How's the year been?
Yeah, what a year.
Yeah.
I know when I think my great before after memory, kind of like you were saying, Alex, thinking about being in the office one day and then not. I was supposed to go to Berlin in March for a funded trip to the University of Minnesota for a writing project I'm working on, and canceled that trip 2 days before I was supposed to go. And then, 4 days later, all US citizens had to come back from wherever they were. So that was when the travel ban, the European travel ban, like kind of went in place. And so I'm glad I didn't go, but also what a time. So just thinking about, the ways that this year could have gone, the research that could have happened. I teach undergrads at the University of Minnesota, and I'm an MFA in creative writing at the U. And so, was teaching virtually for the first time ever in the spring. And now in the fall, I'm teaching totally virtually again, starting this week. And it's been its own thing. I will say that, like, for, and everyone in this room, I feel like, is a creative. And I feel like thinking about, just the way that this summer, I've had to do a lot of learning about, what it means. I'm very geared by my productivity. I'm very geared by, I can give someone the advice of like, productivity isn't a way to measure anything. And like, art doesn't follow that. And that, even sometimes like writing a sentence that you delete is still a worthy thing to do. And even not writing at all is a worthy thing to do. And I still have difficulty taking my own advice, right? So I think this summer has been a lot of time spent putting my art aside in value of some other bigger things. But, there is some days I just watched a lot of Netflix, and then there are other days I'm involved with folks who are organizing around asylum and detention policies put in place by this administration. And especially after Vijay Kumar Thuraisigiyam's Supreme Court case earlier this summer, that's ramped up, and that's been like a really exciting place to put my time. And I'm working on communications and media stuff for them. And that's been really great. And at the same time, I think it's it's kind of realizing that there's always going to be something to put aside the art for. There's always going to be something that's more valuable and more worthy. And I'm just forever trying to learn what it means to give myself 4 hours in the morning that is, dedicated to writing and dedicated to my art. So, still learning that lesson. But hopefully it's something that I will have learned coming out of 2020.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, one thing that kind of dawned on me just a short time ago is how few times, and look, no one wants to be in this pandemic, all right? Everybody wishes it hadn't happened. It's awful, especially how certain things have been handled. But I was thinking, like, how few times everybody with a capital E is forced into a similar situation. And where, Asha, you mentioned we're all creatives, and we have to find, and educators and everybody has to find a new way of doing things, all of like in a very small time span. And one thing that's kind of buoyed me a little bit from kind of falling down into the deep well of dread is that, like, everybody's figuring this out. Everybody's just doing their best, and no one has the answers right now because no one's been tested like this before. No one's had to, like, figure out new avenues of doing things. No one's had to, pivot as hard as everybody's been pivoting. Like, I played basketball in the day, and your boy did not pivot this hard. All right, this is the hardest I've ever had to pivot. So that's been a strange, kind of heartening, almost like weirdly uplifting feeling, like that everybody's kind of in this together. And that can go, a variety of different ways. But in the way that I'm choosing to think about it, at least most times, it's heartening to just feel like everybody's figuring this out. Everybody's doing their best, So,
Yeah.
Asha, Tree, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you hanging in there through the technical snafus and everything that's happened. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope we get to talk again soon. If in the next minute or so, what should the people be looking out for as far as Green Card Voices go? Do you have anything that you want to on the horizon that people should be keeping their eyes out for, their ears out for?
I'm going to defer to Tree on this one.
All right. There's a graphic novel coming. So basically, so illustrators matched with storytellers, and we're trying to figure out the title. We're trying to figure out the cover, but it's coming. There's also the New York. We can pre-order the New York. What's it called? New York upstate New York book, Green Card Voices Youth. It's basically the continuance of our Green Card Voices Youth series, where you get to hear from youth, immigrant, and refugees. This time, the book is based in upstate New York, Rochester, and Buffalo. So that's coming. You can pre-order that. All good. I just want to make sure that you got your word in, because I think you had one more thing to say. And the podcast, I think, will be taking a pause for now. I think I might be leaving in the next few months because we have an internship cycle that's pretty high turnover rate because of the way it's contracted. But those two books are the major things to look out for. And every month until December, I think the third week, we have the Story Stitch facilitator trainings. You can check out our Facebook page and the events to see that. But it's basically, you get to become more educated around how to be, or trained to be better facilitators around our Story Stitch game. So you can conduct storytelling circles in ways that are effective and meaningful and enriching for the people you facilitate with. So yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. We will have all those relevant links to share with the audience to make sure everything is out into the world as much as we can help with. Once again, Asha, Tree, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. We will hopefully talk to you very, very soon. Thanks for all the work that you're doing in the community too. I think it's like super important to have as many voices amplified as much as possible. So coming from me and techdotmn, thank you so much for all your work. It's noticed and it's appreciated. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex, so much for having us. Such a pleasure to be here with you both.
Likewise. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Asha.
All right, folks. We'll sign off. Thank you.
Nice meeting everyone.
Likewise to you. Are we allowed to stay on, or do you need us to get out?
We're just jumping on with our next guests here.
Perfect.
So,
We'll hop off.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right.
You have Josh and Jared.
Hey,
Good morning.
how
How's
are
it
you?
going, Josh? Good. How
Yeah.
are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for
Awesome.
asking.
Absolutely. It looks like you're in the office, but are you in the office?
I'm in the office, and Jared's
Oh.
over in the office next to me. He's
Nice.
just I don't know where he is currently. He's not. All I see is our whiteboard currently. So.
Your depth of focus is amazing. It looks incredible.
That's called a really expensive camera with a really expensive lens. Yeah, that's what that
Gotcha.
is. Yeah. No fake backgrounds here. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Genuine article.
You want to see some cool tricks? So I can control it from my iPad, right? So I
Whoa.
can set the focus on here. So like if I wanted to do like fun camera tricks, I could just focus in on that chair behind me just by clicking on the chair basically. Now I'm out of focus and my chair's in focus. So sometimes
Wow.
we'll put like someone behind me and we'll like go between them, right? Now I'm back in focus.
Wow.
So yeah, fun stuff. Is the audio coming through okay?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah,
Cool.
sounds good on this end.
Awesome. Yeah, I got a couple different ways I can go on the audio. I'm currently just using a wireless lapel right into the camera. That way it syncs my my lips and the audio better. But I could switch over to the broadcasting mic as well if you'd rather have that.
I think you sound great.
Yeah, I think
All
it
right.
sounds just fine. Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to pull my shade down real quick.
Oh, there he is. There's Mr.
the man.
Mustache. There's Mr. Mustache. You a question.
What's going on, guys?
There he is.
Hello.
There he is.
All right. So, Josh, I know your time is a little bit limited here, so I think we'll just kind of dive in if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. You want to go live right now?
Yes.
Oh,
All right.
fine. Yeah,
Cool.
that's fine. Jeez. Oh, God. All right.
Let's do it.
All right.
How do I sound? Okay.
You sound like yourself. It's okay. We'll get through it. Don't worry about it.
Nice.
All right. All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Tech.mn live podcast booth for Twin Cities 2020. We have our second guests of the morning here. Excuse me. We have Josh Feedy and Jared. Boy, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm so sorry.
Hey, that's okay. Greenison. That's
Greenison.
how you do it. Yeah. It's fine.
All
Absolutely
right.
fine.
From Sales Reach, we have the two Sales Reach guys here, and we are going to be talking about the new podcast that's being started. Is that right?
Yeah. We figured, one wasn't, tying up too much of our time. We might as well start a second podcast while we're at it.
That's right.
So
And that first one being the founder's mentality.
Yeah. So the first podcast was the founder's mentality, and I've kind of put that one on hold for a bit because I'm a stickler for quality. And my whole vision with that one was that I would always have guests in my personal podcast studio and do the bulk of those interviews face to face. I really liked the visual aspect I was able to get with that, with just setting up the cameras and having the live guests and the interactions. And obviously we can't do that right now. So it's kind of killed my passion for producing additional episodes. We've tried a couple of them remote at Founders Mentality, and I just don't love the audio quality that I can get on the guest side. So we're putting a hold on that. But what we're really passionate about right now is the new podcast called the Buyer Enablement Podcast. And really where this came from is that term we discovered in a Gartner study that really kind of became our Bible here at Sales Reach, because when we read that study, Gartner was talking about the number one challenge facing B2B sales today is buyer confusion. And it wasn't confusion caused because the salesperson was really doing anything any different. It's just confusion because of the way the modern buyer makes their decisions today. And what they were citing is the fact that consumers go to B2B websites, they identify their own problems and their own solutions on those websites. And they're not reaching out to a salesperson until they're over 70% of the way through their buyer's journey from what they used to do, right? I mean, they used to involve sales professionals way early on. Help us identify our challenges. Help us identify your solutions. It's completely changed the game. And Gartner called the solution to this buyer enablement. And for us, it was a big light bulb moment because we had already been building sales reach for a year and a half before that article came out. And we were trying to help solve and help make a better B2B buying process, but we didn't really have a term to put on it at the time until we read the article. And so now we're just grabbing onto it. Now, Jared and I, our full-time job is essentially evangelizing the buyer enablement movement, helping turn that buzzword into the next big buzzword, right? Trying to get buyer enablement into the same place in people's vocabulary as sales enablement, sales acceleration, marketing, sales and marketing alignment. We think that buyer enablement is the most important piece of all those puzzles. And so that's really what the podcast is going to be all about.
Fantastic. Now,
Nice
what can people, it's still in its infancy, right? There's only been one episode released, if I'm correct.
We've only released one episode. We've recorded 3 episodes. So we're just kind of sitting on them, you know, because anyone out there thinking about getting into podcasting, the most important thing you can do is have some episodes in the hopper because life gets busy, business gets busy, and your audience is impatient if you don't release on a steady schedule. So you want to have some episodes in the hopper. But we've reached out to, I mean, it's Jared can attest to this. The reception from the guests that we've wanted to have on it has been absolutely incredible. We kind of like started out with this list of like 10 people that it was like, man, it would be awesome if we could get them on the show. Every single one of them that we've reached out to so far has said, absolutely, let's talk about it. There's only so many people that are preaching the importance of buyer enablement right now. Most people aren't using that term just yet, but so many people understand the importance of making it easier for your buyers to make sense of the deal. And so it's really, we're finding like-minded individuals. We're building our tribe while we're building this podcast. And those first 3 episodes, the first one with Todd Hockenberry, he's one of my heroes. That one was incredible. If anyone listening to this hasn't checked it out, Apple finally put it on Apple Podcasts just yesterday, so you can finally check it out there. The next one is going to be with Ethan Butte from BombBomb. Great episode. And then the third episode, Ethan's amazing. And then the third one is a guy that Jared and I came across on LinkedIn. First name Shiv, last name can't pronounce, but absolutely incredible mind this man has. And he's very focused on aligning sales and marketing teams. So the first 3 episodes were coming out of the gate really strong, really excited about it.
Very cool. Now, Jared, what has been your relationship and history in terms of podcasting and doing kind of audio or video content like you guys are producing now?
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, for it's startup weeks and it's techmn, so I feel like I can mention this and people will know. I used to work at Radio KUOM at the University of Minnesota, and they're big on podcasting now. But during my day, it was sort of like the next frontier. It was right. the exciting thing. And for a radio station to do a podcast, it was like, it's a great opportunity. We were doing in-studio performances, recording bands and playing around with audio like that with interviews. Wow. And before that, my first job was actually at my hometown radio station that was WTKM. I think they're still around, but they're like an online stream now. They got bought out by one of these big broadcasting houses. It was a small transmitter, so that's how it goes with those small town radio stations. But yeah, that was I love to tell people because then I have to explain what it is. It was the byline was, "We're the polka place." So it was a polka station. I was working there on Sunday mornings, but I was playing gospel and country music. So it's kind of my experience behind the microphone. But man, podcasts, like as like a rabid podcast consumer. Oh yeah. Bring it back. Polka. Come on, man.
Hold on a minute. You were. I never knew this. You were on a polka channel playing country, and I mean, the wrong music, dude. Like, is anyone else picking up on that? Yeah.
You missed it.
I was
going to demographic. Think about the demographic.
Sounds like you're going to be like, welcome to the radio station, bringing your pa every single day.
But here's some rhythm and blues because Jared's at the wheel and he doesn't know what the heck we're doing over here.
Hey, it was freeform late at night. You could play whatever you wanted.
Jared's going to be spinning some Led Zeppelin on your polka channel this evening. Yeah.
It's so funny you mentioned that. The owner was a total like Led Zeppelin fan. Like he loved classic rock.
Awesome. Stay away at midnight every single night.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I don't know the demographic. Like if you think about who's really into polka music these days,
we're not going down this road.
It skews a little older.
It's the young people, right?
I think All right. You asked about my experience about podcasting.
Alex, eject. Let's not go down this polka road right now. Don't let him do it.
Hey, if anyone wants to learn, I'll give them a polka lesson.
That's actually funny that you mentioned the U of M radio station because I went to the University of St. Thomas, and when I was there, I think my sophomore year, they started KUST, which was their kind of broadcast thing. I'm pretty sure it was just online, but it was such a ramshackle, like stitched together operation. But that's what made it so fun. And I remember I was just getting into podcasts at the same time, but no one, I mean, that was back in the dark ages of like 2007, 2008. So it was still kind of a relatively new medium in terms of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And now I look, and I was also still just doing newspapers, actual newspapers. We were producing a newspaper. So that shows how like technologically advanced we were. And of course, the year after I graduate, they're doing podcasts and everything's online and everything like that. So we missed the wave on that one, I think, a little bit.
The wave's here, man. It's huge.
Yeah.
Look at us. We're podcasting about podcasting.
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, anyone listening, Alex, I mean, you didn't miss the wave at all. Nobody's missed the wave yet. There's 30,000 podcasts, but most of them don't make it past episode 3. I think the last time I saw the stat was like 90% of podcasts don't even make it past episode 3. So, if there's anybody out there watching this, I mean, I think from a startup perspective, podcasting has been absolutely incredible for our business. And I'm sure for the ones of people tuning into this right now that are looking for some information about how they could apply this podcasting thing to their business. If you're a B2B brand, find a way to get into podcasting. It's been absolutely incredible for sales reach. Even the founder's mentality was great for our business development, honestly, because what it did was it brought a group of people interested in possibly starting a business, but most of them currently work in a very successful role in a very successful large organization, that most of them won't actually take the leap into entrepreneurship. But it brought attention to our business to them through a very non-salesy sort of approach, right? We built trust through the founder's mentality. A lot of those subscribers turned into customers. A lot of the guests turned into customers. Some even turned into investors, right? So podcasting was an incredible way for us to kind of build awareness around our business without going onto LinkedIn and saying, hey, have you heard about sales reach? Hey, have you heard about sales reach? Because nobody listens, right? Mm-hmm. If you put up a post on LinkedIn and you say, hey, I want to tell you all about my business sales reach, you're going to get all of like 1 like, and it's probably your mother. And you're going to get maybe 2 comments, and it's probably your employees. But you go up and you bring actual value, you bring stories, you bring help to people. Those are the posts that really gain traction. And those are the posts that really lead to a lot of awareness. So getting into podcasting, it can be super easy and it can be super challenging. It all depends on what level you want to be producing your content at. But I mean, you can always use a cell phone to record your audio, upload the audio file from that to any streaming service, and you're good to go. You got a podcast. Or you can go and invest in a bunch of nice equipment and go a little crazier and edit everything out and produce with video like we do. And it takes more time. But it's really up to like you to decide what level you want to go to. But at the end of the day, there's a ton of opportunity in podcasting for building brand awareness and brand authority. And if you have a B2B brand right now and you're not jumping on that bandwagon, you should be figuring out a strategy of how you can. And if you need connections to people that can help make that easy for you, we have customers that do just that, that I'd be happy to make introductions to.
Mm-hmm. Now that process of, sorry, Jared. That process of the actual tangible business benefits that you found from your show and from your show going forward, I assume, was that an organic process that you kind of figured out as it happened, or did you have a strategy in place to say, okay, we're going to do this podcast. We know we're going to have listeners. Here's how we're going to transition those listeners into potential customers.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think well, I have a funny thing to say about that, actually. So getting back to, this show's called the Buyer Enablement Podcast, right? So it's a marketing channel, but for salespeople that are listening, what is the role of marketing? I heard a good clip on LinkedIn the other day, the CMO of Gong.io. We love Gong. He had said the role of marketing is to make sales easier, and that's sort of the end of it. And what's so funny about that is when you think about buyer enablement and you think about how people shop today, how people shop for software or even do their research, they don't necessarily do so in the way that we like to think about it, where it's they're at the awareness stage, then they're at the consideration stage, and then they're at the decision stage, and they're moving down this linear journey all the way up to the point of purchase. Just think about the last time you bought something off of, Instagram or off of Amazon, or, actually talked to a salesperson to buy it. You were probably bouncing all over the place. If you look at your web history, you were maybe looking at a case study one day, or you're looking at testimonials the next day. And then you were reading the blog and then subscribing. We're all over the place as buyers. So a podcast is a really good channel for salespeople to sort of put themselves out there, really warm up leads, play the marketing game a little bit, to sort of build a personal brand and bring buyers into you and your personality and how you think about things and what you're really passionate about. And if it turns out you're really, really passionate about what your business is selling, or better yet, the problem that your business is solving, then people are actually going to approach you like they already know you. But we, of course, have never had a conversation before, have just been listening to you sort of have fun conversations with other people. And that's what's really unique about podcasting, is the intimacy of the experience.
What I would add to that as well is a couple of things. And I do want to get to your strategy question, Alex, because I actually love that question, and Jared will like it too. But regardless, but what I want to say first is it's not just about having your own podcast. Find podcasts that you can appear on as a valuable guest for them and for their audience, because what I've actually found is that the best business development use case for podcasting for me has been me appearing on other people's podcasts. They have a bigger audience than me. They've been doing the podcast thing longer than we have, and their audience is looking for solutions to their problems that podcast has been good at bringing solutions to in the past, right? So just as an example, last week, I had 3 leads come in that I couldn't attribute to anything. I didn't know where they came from. I always start every call with, how did you hear about Sales Reach? All 3 of them heard about me because I was on the B2B growth show through Sweetfish Media. They all 3 in 1 week came from that one appearance. And the thing that was beautiful about it is I was on that show for, I think, all of 40 minutes, 45 minutes, but I was able to not only give an elevator pitch on what our business does, but explain the exact problem that our product solves for. When those customers came to me, they were so informed about exactly how we could help solve the exact problems that they had. They were citing references from the podcast I was on. It was one of the easiest sales I've ever had in my life, all 3 of them, because this was a very informed audience that knew exactly what they were coming to me for. And they were more or less just coming to me to get signed up on the platform, right? They didn't really have any more questions. They wanted to see how it works first, but then get going on it. But to get back to your other question, Alex, my favorite one is your question on strategy. So you have 2 key departments in Sales Reach in front of you right now. Hi, I'm Josh. I'm like Mr. No Strategy. I'm Mr. Let's just move fast and break stuff all day long. Jared's job is he's the brakes. He's like, Josh, let's throttle this a little bit. Can we actually do something around this? Can you just not do just that and call it a day? It's really important in all organizations that sales and marketing work really closely together. We live and breathe that every day at our organization. Just as an example, I brought Jared on as a part-time salesperson last week. Why? Couple of reasons. One, we're in revenue mode right now. We're just trying to grow as fast as we can possibly grow. And nobody's listened to me on more demo calls than Jared. But two, I believe that marketers become better, especially when they're working for a sales-focused organization, if they actually become a part of the sales team. If they can actually hear exactly what the customers are saying during the sales process. It's a very valuable exercise for any marketer. And I would encourage any marketer out there to try to live a life as a salesperson, even if it's only for 2 weeks in their organization. Jared had some immediate epiphanies coming out of just the first week where he was really starting to analyze the text that he was writing in things like automated email campaigns. He was realizing that nobody's going to read this because in sales, short and sweet and fast is what wins the deals. So if short, sweet, and fast wins deals, why am I writing a novel every time we send them an email, right? And it's had immediate benefits to our business just because of that exercise. So do that.
I would also, I'd like to add to it sounds weird to say like Jared's like a part-time salesperson, but let me say this, what is, when you're producing your podcast or like you're asking people to get on, what is marketing when it's done really well? I mean, it's kind of tip of the spear sales, isn't it? I mean, you know who your customers should be. You know who you're supposed to be talking to. You're supposed to be producing content that is relevant to them, not to everybody, but to them, so that they'll do business with you. And like for any marketer, I guess I would just say go get like a virtual happy hour with like a BDR and just like live in their world a little bit and try to understand what it's like to like think of a whole wide world of people that you could do business with and stay focused on like just a couple. That's really good marketing, and like entry-level salespeople are doing it all the time. So it was really good to put myself in that frame of mind, because like when we're all competing for so much attention, podcasts or otherwise, like you really got to get it down. Like you really have to understand like what is the value that you're bringing, and how in like a very little amount of time can you get someone to say, okay, my busy day, my calendar, I'll put that aside and listen to this guy for just a little bit, or this person.
And Alex, before you jump in, like what's really important there is that you know me, I never let anybody talk. If you think about what Jared just said there, that's where the value in podcasting is for your business, because job number one is identifying who your audience is. Job number two is identifying what they need to become more informed and to eventually become a customer, right? That is all that podcasts are about. So I would challenge any startup businesses out there, or even any established businesses that are maybe chiming in or listening in on this, that don't have a podcast right now. What kind of podcast could you put together to entertain and inform your ideal customers? Because if you can find a way to entertain and inform your ideal customers, it is going to tie to revenue very quickly. So anyway, Alex, you can come back in now. It's fine.
Thank you. One thing that you mentioned and that I thought was kind of interesting given the context of the conversation is that you said in sales, short, sweet, and fast seals the deal. So how do you reconcile that need for brevity with podcasting's more kind of usually fluid and kind of long form discussion thing? That was a great way of describing it. But
very professional, Alex.
You got it.
Thank you, guys.
Go. Let's talk about things. Let's just it's
a show of things.
Yeah.
But how do you reconcile that need for short, sweet, and fast with a more conversational medium?
Simple answer: micro content. Long answer is you got to understand that people are willing to digest information in different ways at different times in their life. If you look at the consumption of podcasts, 99% of podcasts are consumed when someone is either working out or driving to the office. These days, not so much driving to the office, but for sure working out. That's a captive audience. They're captive because they got an hour to burn and they just need something to occupy their mind. Now, they're not going to be reading your emails while they're running down the pathway or while they're, bench pressing or whatever people do at health clubs. I don't know. But when they are listening to a podcast, they're just turning it on. They're looking for education. They're looking to be informed. That's where you can be a little more long-winded about it. But when you think about the other mediums that we're delivering information to people through, I don't even know how many emails I've received while we've been on this call alone right here, right? All of us have. Everyone that's like tuning in right now, their computer's probably dinging every 5 seconds with another email. Most of them are sales solicitations. That's what we get in our inbox. And it's just flooded with it, right? We don't have time to read those things unless it's short, sweet, and concise. And unless there's actually some sort of action that needs to be taken out of them. And if there isn't, they just get ignored. Perfect example. I just got an email yesterday from someone perfectly nice that was requesting that I help out with some college that's doing something, but the email was like 8 paragraphs long, and I don't have time to read that. I just don't. I don't have time to go through that, and I'm just not going to respond to that one. Because if that's how much time you need out of me on the first interaction, I don't even want to think about the amount of time you're going to need from me if I commit to this, and I don't have time to commit to that sort of relationship right now.
I would say on the topic of brevity, the best way to get someone to listen to your podcast is the name of the guest that you're having on. Mm-hmm. And the other part is the micro content, as Josh said. So you have an hour-long conversation like this, and there's probably going to be some hot take. There's probably going to be a really good quote. There's probably going to be some goofball moment where there's some laughing. If you cut those out and you're able to use video, like use that to promote your podcast, that people are always kind of aware that this show is happening. But as soon as someone sees like a guest that they already have trust with, or if that they know is really, really smart, they're going to tune in. They're going to pop in and just try your podcast out for the first time. So it sounds hard to hear, but the best way to grow a podcast is through guests, is to bring on big names and have conversations. The other approach that too is a good mix, and I think that's what we're looking at is like, a big guest with big names. Yeah, let's go for those people, but like who are really, really smart, because you can use a podcast, as we all know, for so many other content channels that it just makes social media easier with good clips and good quotes. And it can be really inspirational for your blog too, to kind of weave in some experts with, a decent blog post. So it's not just one person talking the whole time.
One of the other things too, and one of the strategies we're going to be employing with our new podcast, not to give away all of our secret sauce, Jared, sorry. But we're not always going to do 30 or 60-minute podcasts with the Buyer Enablement Podcast. Every once in a while, we might just have a random thought that we want to reach out to someone in our network and ask them a quick question and have a quick 5-minute conversation. And that might be an episode right there. Because one of the most important things, if you want to grow your podcast, that we're seeing from some of the more successful podcasts out there, is consistency. And consistency right now, for me, has been trying to release an episode every 2 weeks, because podcasting is my part-time job, not my full-time job. But if we can produce high value, but low budget as far as like editing time and all of that sort of stuff and scheduling restraints, if we can keep it more off the cuff and we can just move quickly and release things more frequently, almost on a daily basis, if we can get to that point, that's where you're really going to grow your viewership. And what you'll find is that people are going to binge that kind of stuff just like they do on Netflix. They're not going to tune into your podcast every day for a 5-minute clip. Maybe they will, but what they will likely do is wait till the end of the week, and then they'll just binge all 5 of the 5-minute clips in a row while they're lifting weights or whatever they do in health clubs.
Folding laundry. Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think there's such thing as too much in terms of podcasting content or that micro content or?
Yes. If you're not bringing value, shut up. Like, I mean, I don't want to be like, want to be like that guy, but seriously, like there are so many people making so much noise, and they haven't really fleshed out how that translates to their business. It's not really what they do. It's not really where their experience is. They're just trying to jump on a bandwagon of something that's popular. There is absolutely too much noise in many, many channels right now. And I think what I challenge people to do every day is, number one, find where you personally bring value to this world. Then the second question is, how do you tie that value you bring to the world to what your business does for the world? and then make that your sole focus every day. Like if you're truly an expert in something and you truly know about something, then let's bring that content to the world, because we can't get enough as a world. We can't get enough of valuable, high value content that's going to help us all move to the next level. But we can get enough of content that really isn't helpful coming from people that don't really understand what they're talking about. And I'm not saying this in a way where I want anyone to feel like they shouldn't just get started, because everybody fumbles through it in the beginning and has to get started. But honestly, be honest with yourself. Should you be talking about this? And if you shouldn't, just stop. Was that too rude? That was probably way too rude.
Hey, we're doing it live.
We're doing it live. Anything goes. This is just coffee in here right now. I don't even know why I'm so angry. Yeah.
Yeah. So Alex, the question about is there too much? I would say yes, but no. But so there's one thing, like coming from like an age. Yeah,
I know.
I'm ready to do it. Coming
this
from an
is
agency
like
background,
country music in a polka station, Jared. Jeez.
Exactly.
Hey, I was just a DJ. I wasn't the programming director.
And that, folks, is what we call a callback.
Yeah. Very pro. We're very pro over here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. So a lot of people think that it's time to post, so I gotta post, and I've been guilty of that. Right? Like, a lot of agencies do this for clients. If a client says like, I want to be posting on these social media platforms 4 times a day, and I just want to make sure that happens. Well, what would you do if you sent out, this is the same thing with podcasting. What would you do if like you sent out an email, 3 emails a day, because that was the goal, just to send 3 emails to your customers a day, just to stay top of mind, just Nordstrom style, like, like they would unsubscribe, right? So what's really hot right now is personal branding and being able to post on LinkedIn and, showing what you're learning, showing, the unique value proposition that Josh had said earlier. But if you're just posting because it's time to post, the unsubscribe is going to be you, So I like, it's like, I want to tell people that it is really easy to get started with a podcast, that you can download Anchor and you can record from your phone and you can do it. And I want to encourage more people to produce content, especially people who have so much knowledge and really, really have something to share. And I think that's more people than we know. But I also want to say, like, just think about it. Just like think about it before you do it, because I think we're all searching for content that is really thought out. And like there is a lot of just post because it's time to post content. And I think you should feel proud about it. I think we're as marketers, we're sort of hitting this maturity stage when it comes to social media, and I think that it's no longer just post because we got to post. How can we actually provide value? How can we make that pattern interrupt in the feed? How can we be creative? So I think if you're launching a podcast, like, dude, play around with the format. Like, try to do a 5-minute podcast, like, a couple of times a week, and see how that goes. And then just do a 30-minute one and see if people start talking about that 30-minute one.
So is that, is that something that you guys are keeping in mind going forward with the Buyer Enablement podcast, keeping that fluidity and keeping that flexibility, saying like, hey, we just posted a 7-minute, like, single question with this topic expert and it blew up. We're going to do more of those instead of like dedicating an hour and a half, to, an hour and a half plus whatever it takes to post process and post edit and do all that. Is that something you're keeping in mind, that flexibility? And is that something that you would, you just said this, Jared, but is that something that you would really impress on people who are looking to start their own podcast? Like, stay flexible, don't be afraid to change.
The conventional knowledge is stay on a tight schedule. Like, and I think that maybe it comes from like a broadcasting standpoint, like every show Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Central, like that. If you don't have the bandwidth to really nail that, then why would you set yourself up to fail? And like I think your question has like 2 parts. Like, should you be testing? Should you be flexible and see what works and go with what's working? Absolutely, yes. That's also like a conventional or sort of a common knowledge piece. But I think the key there is don't hold yourself to like a rigid a content production schedule if you can't nail it. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that because you publish every Thursday at 9 a.m. that you're going to get the listenership, right? I would try to just do what you can to be as relevant as possible, and that probably doesn't look like Tuesday, Thursday, right? That probably looks like, a post and then, a series of shorter posts, or like letting somebody else co-host or something like this.
Yep.
Interesting. So between the two of you, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Jared, you're a fairly recent full-time hire to Salesforce. Is that right? Like
Sales
this
Reach,
year?
yeah.
Sales Reach. Sorry. Woof.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh boy.
That actually happens a lot.
Salesforce. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, it's very intentional. Don't worry about it. Yeah. That's
Right.
Yeah. It's very intentional. Yeah.
Gotcha. So how has it been kind of transitioning your work interactions, your work dynamic into a co-host dynamic for the Buyer Enablement Podcast? And is that something you've had specific conversations about? Like, I'm going to kind of occupy this role and Josh is going to occupy that role? Or is it just like hit record and hold on to your butts because we're going, folks?
I'm sure Josh would like the latter piece, as he sort of laid out like a little bit of our working dynamic with Josh's go, let's break stuff kind of mentality. And then Jared being like, let's
hit
make sure we
record.
get a CTA on this. Let's drive some traffic to the website. I would say that for people interested in co-hosting or even hosting, like, I would say just take a breath, be yourself, and just kind of let your personality show. It's a conversation. If it helps, I've had some guests on for recording that I found it really helps for them not to do the video piece, to call in using a cell phone, because we all have had long conversations on a cell phone before, and we can kind of pace in our room and think about things. Like, just if that helps you as a host, do that. I would say don't put so much pressure on yourself to be the podcast host with all of the ideas. Just be yourself. And I think that's what people want to listen to anyway.
They do. And the other thing too, so this is very strategic, the way that we're putting this together. Jared right now is the only co-host, but that's not the vision, the long game vision of the Buyer Enablement Podcast. The long game vision of the Buyer Enablement Podcast is that new employees that come in that have a proficiency, an aptitude, and a desire to be a part of producing that content will also become co-hosts of that podcast. They'll be able to reach out to customers and prospects that they're talking to and invite them to be on the show with them hosting it. It's going to be more of a group effort. Right now, it's just the Jared and Josh show. And right now, Jared does talking only when I let him, because I can't stop myself. Like, I'm the worst, right? And so we're figuring out that dynamic right now. It's really fun. Like, we totally have different styles when it comes to this. I'm the type of person that literally just hits record and I just go. And I typically just keep what I went with, because it's typically good enough for me to be fine with it. That's why, like with the Founders Mentality and with Buyer Enablement Podcast, we are not editing those as far as the content. We are keeping them true to form. And that's really important to me. Jared likes to discuss things before we get into it, but more. So we're definitely like, I'm having to throttle myself a little bit, and we're having to sit down and say, okay, Jared, when I hit record this time, here's kind of what I'm going to like lead out with so that you know how to answer. Because our first couple episodes, our first couple trials, literally the outtakes are hilarious, but it would be, I'd hit record, I'd go into it, and then I'd look at Jared and he'd just look at me for like 3 seconds of nothing. And then he'd just laugh and he'd be like, can you cue me in? Like, how am I supposed to come in on that? Right. Yeah. And so like figuring out a way to work with your co-host, that's definitely going to be like, that's what we're working on right now. We're committed to figuring it out, and it's going to be fine. Right. But yeah, that is, anyone that's like looking to start a podcast with co-hosts, like, get ready, because everybody has a different way of producing content, and everybody feels comfortable in a different way, just with free flowing or needing planning or whatever. And you got to find like that happy medium in between.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Now, as someone who is a sales expert, no, just kidding. I know nothing about sales, basically, and nothing about buying.
Everything sales.
Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry. That's awesome. That was the saddest sorry I've ever heard in my life. From hearing sales luminaries talk, one thing that I always hear kind of come back to is like, you have to be genuine, and it's about a connection, and it's about forging a relationship to kind of seal that deal. But from someone who's outside looking in, and this could be the wrong perspective, and I fully expect you to correct me if I am incorrect. There seems to be the need for some posturing, for some sort of kind of handshaking, kissing babies personality that you turn on and off when you're in that sales mode, and when you're just kicking back on your recliner or something like that. Yeah. And I'm wondering, number one, is that the case, or do you feel that's the case? And number two, do you feel yourself kind of slipping into that mode when you hit record on the podcast? Do you kind of adapt the, I'm Josh the host now, I'm Jared the host now, and then you hit end and you're like, okay, now I'm Josh and now I'm Jared?
Yeah, so most episodes end with me telling Jared to get out of my office because I need quiet time. One thing that might shock you to know is I am absolutely an introvert. Absolutely. I would much rather just be in a room by myself, focusing on whatever I'm passionate about, doing my own thing. That's me. But the other thing that might shock you, since you're not in sales, is that most great salespeople are in fact introverts. There is a moment before I do anything that I literally have to flip a switch, and I have to go into Josh mode. Jared calls it the Josh show. He's always like, all right, well, we're going to go do the Josh show now, because that's like the moment where like my brain just switches on. And it's really like most salespeople, when I look for good salespeople in organizations, what I look for are people that are natural entertainers. That's what makes a good salesperson. Salespeople are able to walk into a room, read the room, understand what's going to make people laugh, what triggers are going to cause people to not like you, and just be warm and embracing and be a good entertainer. Be the kind of person that people actually want to be around, because when they're in your environment, they feel like they're part of something fun. They leave feeling good about the time with you. Good salespeople are good entertainers. And yes, you do have to, I mean, just like anytime, the last time you threw a holiday party, Alex, right? You had your in-laws over to your house. Were you excited the whole day before they even got there? Or did you like force yourself to get excited the second you heard the doorbell ring, right? I won't make you answer because they might be listening. You know, it's probably
also,
only...
Josh, last time I went to a holiday party, I was disastrously single. So thank you for bringing it up. I really appreciate that.
So sorry. Well, maybe if we worked on your sales abilities, maybe we could also solve that problem. So, because I mean, relationships are all sales as well, if we're being honest. My wife tells me all the time, the only reason I got her is because I'm the greatest salesman in the world. And I agree with her because she's way out of my league. But regardless, you know, that we have the ability to turn it on. But I think what's really important, not just for a podcast host or just for a salesperson, but specifically to the audience that's probably tuning into this, founders need to have the ability to turn it on and to turn it off at just the flip of a dime, right? Because we are so on all day long. We need to be able, my friend Meredith, she does a great job talking about this all the time, where Meredith Kathleen Newman, if nobody listening knows who she is, you should know who she is. I think she has a session coming up soon anyway. But she talks about finding your window. When you get really excited, you go into your hypo zone. When you get like really depressed, you go into your hyper zone, where you just don't want to be bothered. You don't want to be troubled. The best place to be is right in the middle, where you're your kindest, best version of yourself. Many salespeople go into that hyper zone every time they talk to a prospect. Many founders go into the hyper zone every time they're talking to a prospect or talking to an investor, and sometimes even talking to employees, trying to rally the team. And then what many founders do is dip into that hyper or hypo area immediately when they get home. Now they're in this like comfortable environment. Their spouse is asking them questions. Their kids are asking them questions, and they just want to be in a dark room for 30 minutes to find their space. It's really important to be able to go between those things. not just as a podcast host, but as a founder, and just honestly, just as a better person as well. When you can figure out ways to control that, it makes your whole life easier to manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say that seems like good advice on a daily basis for any human being living in the world, especially today.
Look up Meredith Kathleen Newman. She's amazing, and she talks about this a lot. She's a really good person.
Shout out Scale Within.
Scaling Within was on the Founders Mentality podcast. She talks specifically about that on there. So if anybody's curious about that, just go to that episode on thefoundersmentality.com.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I really like that question. I think it's a really good question because there's so much pressure on authenticity, figuring out what your authentic self is. For me, I think it's just very similar to Josh. It's just about tapping into sort of a mindset or a frame. So when you're on a show, you don't want to be low register. You don't want to be sort of dry, sad, boring guy. You're there to entertain a bit and inform, right? So I try to tap into like a moment, like a time that really I was like having a great time, like a North Shore vacation or a birthday party or just being around my friends or something like that. So I can kind of remember what that energy feels like so that I can bring that. Because you do really need to sort of, like I said, entertain. I mean, people are there to not only get some tidbits, but to just kind of hang out. That's kind of what a podcast feels like to me is hanging out with the hosts. Those are the best ones.
And if all else fails, just grow a really sweet mustache so that like people have something to smile about when they're watching you on camera.
Amen. If anybody watching takes one thing away from this entire discussion, it needs
grow
to be
a mustache. Yeah, grow a mustache. Yeah,
that's right. They're coming back.
I think people have been saying
I'm bringing
them
back.
No. Gentlemen, I know we got started a little early here. I know you guys have to move on in a few minutes, so we'll wrap up. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your insight and appreciate everything that you've contributed to the larger Minnesota community here. It's noticed and it's appreciated. So thank you so much. What can people look forward to in terms of either sales reach, nailed it, or the buyer enablement podcast going forward?
Yeah. With sales reach, we just launched, we just took our newest feature out of beta. We made it official to all our customers. So now we are officially a video hosting platform as well. So now we have the ability for any sales rep building a personalized page for their prospect to additionally record a personalized video directly on the page. And when they share that page, they can share it on social channels, they can share it as a text, but that video becomes the social share image as well. So we're really stoked on that feature. We're always working on new rollouts for the platform and always looking for ways to make it easier for our audience or for our customers to use the platform more frequently in their day-to-day. So from a product perspective, just look for constant innovation from Sales Reach. We're constantly moving towards something, and we're always listening to our customers and prioritizing their needs first. Always, always, always. From the podcast side, just watch for some of the greatest, honestly, some of these guests coming on, I'm so excited about them. Dan and Lloyd Knowlton are going to be on. If you don't know who they are, Google, look them up on LinkedIn. Absolutely hilarious. They do some of the greatest videos I've ever seen on LinkedIn. We're going to have Daniel Disney on. He is just an absolute pro at social selling. Seriously, some of the guests that are willing to be a part of this with us, I don't know why they're willing to be a part of it with us, but they've been very receptive so far. And so we're really excited about those future shows.
Hey, Josh. The people got to vote. We're up for an award, my man. An emerging startup award.
Yeah, we need that. We need your votes.
Sales Reach.
Vote Sales Reach in the Emerging Startup Award through techmn. We were up for it last year. We didn't win last year. It was rigged. This year it was rigged. And it was no, I'm kidding. Sean Higgins right now is like, screw that, Josh Feedy. Like I totally earned that. No, it was rigged. It was rigged, Sean Higgins.
Yeah, better you is turning into angrier me.
Better you. Let's talk about better me. Let's talk about better Sales Reach. Vote Sales Reach. We need to win this year. I'm really hoping that techmn hands out the canoe paddles because I really wanted one of those last year.
They're
And my
so
buddy
sweet.
Nikolai got one, and he hung it up on his wall. And every time I talk to
Jealous.
him, I see it, and it makes me angry. I have a perfect corner for the paddle right back here. So let's vote Sales Reach for the emerging startup. And then once we win that this year, then next year we can recompete against Better You in the next category, and then we can crush them at that point, and life will be fine. So we're in sales. Salespeople are competitive. You didn't think I was going to answer this in a nice PC sort of way.
We love to see.
Is
We love to see it. We love to see
Yeah.
people succeed for sure.
Yeah.
But it better be us this time.
yeah, but it better be us. Yeah,
That is
better
a
be
good
us.
PSA. That is a good PSA.
Yeah.
Final voting closes tonight at midnight at 11:59. Today is the final day to vote.
I didn't know that, Jared. You better get on the interwebs and start making sure that.
Send
Yeah,
a DM.
let's blow this up. We need to win. Today's the last day, people. Let's do
You
this.
can go to tech.mn. There's a banner right at the top. Vote for all of the awards, all of the wonderful finalists that we have, including the gentleman from Sales.
Most
Reach
importantly, yes.
Yes.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah. And we will personally thank everybody that votes. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to know where the votes are coming from. We're not going to do anything. We're going to celebrate and probably buy more Sales Reach socks so we can hand out more swag for people, So that'll be, yeah.
That sounds like a wonderful plan. Josh, Jared, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully you can do it again soon. All the best with Sales Reach, all the best with the Buyer Name Out podcast. Hopefully the Founders Mentality can come back in some form after
eventually
the world kind of builds itself back up after all this craziness that we're going through. So thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Alex.
We will be back shortly, folks, for everybody listening for the live podcast booth for Twin Cities Startup Week 2020. Ian Levitt from Studio Americana is going to be our next guest. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a good one. Josh and Jared, thanks so much again. You can go ahead and hop off the call. Appreciate your time.
We'll see you.
Thank you. Alex, are you still there?
Yes, but I believe we're still live right now.
Uh-oh.
I mean, if you guys want to have a little green room while everybody's watching, we can do that. But otherwise, you just have to talk offline.
Let's just talk offline. I'll send you an email. No worries.
All right. Sounds good, Josh.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, folks. We are going to take a short break. I'm going to throw up a title card here. I'm going to refill my coffee and grab a quick drink of water. And we will be on very shortly. It's 10:55 right now. We'll be on in about 15 or so minutes, despite what that says. Around 11:15, we'll say. We'll give you a heads up. You can follow us on techdotmn on Twitter, and you'll know all of the updates. So I will talk to you very soon.
Hey, Alex.
Hello. Are we switched? We are switched.
We are switched. Yeah, we're
All
back
right.
on live. Just got the slate clean off there, and the music faded down.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, welcome back to the Tech.mn live podcast booth, part of Twin Cities Startup Week 2020. It has been a great morning so far. We've had a couple of wonderful guests talking on a variety of topics, and we're going to continue that trend now. We have Ian Levitt.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Levitt.
Levitt. Nailed it. We have Ian Levitt, the president and audio engineer of Studio Americana, and we have John Dahl here, a client host for Studio Americana here. We're going to be talking about their history with audio, their history with podcasting, their history with all of this stuff that we're working with right now, and we're going to get some expert tips from them. Maybe. We'll see. Or we'll just have a fun conversation. Either way, it's going to be a good chat. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
And
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just for clarity's sake, these two gentlemen have actually been in the background all morning as shadowy figures, helping.
We lurk. We like to lurk.
Exactly. Yes, you're the ring wraiths of the podcasting world, just hiding just out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
That's for the Lord of the Rings fans in the audience. You know what I mean? So, Ian, let's start with you. Give us a little bit of rundown of your history with audio engineering, with producing. I believe you started in the radio industry. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So I started in like over-the-air classic radio. I did that for about 20 years. I started in that when I was 15 at a little rural country radio station in North Dakota, and just kept doing it. Was fortunate enough to continue. I don't know, somehow gainfully being employed within the radio industry for quite a while, and even through like from 15 years old and on, and really found a love for the production side of it. I mean, I did on air for the vast majority of that time. Before I left radio, I was the program director for a radio station, so kind of running the operations of it. And so, radio was my career for a long time, and I loved it. And there was just a great, a very fortunate past to have that as, your career. But I saw things going kind of a different direction about, we'll say over the last decade, but really acutely over the last 5 years. I really saw that this wave of on-demand everything was where everything was going to go. And at the same time that kind of traditional radio was certainly going to change models. It was going to be a different thing than what it had been for decades. So that coming together kind of started, what we do now, which is produce that technical side of podcasts. So, along the way I did, I worked in a little bit of television. I did some freelance audio production over the last decade. So had done things beyond just radio itself. But I think that kind of environment and the skills I learned there have translated really well to being able to help other people that just want really have a passion to do a podcast or to do an audio show of any sort, but have not walked up to it because of some of the technical hurdles. So
Fantastic. And John, talk us through your history, kind of where you started with audio production and everything, and how you got to Studio Americana today.
Well, my name is John Dahl. My background comes from video. I owned a production company for 10 years. I lived in Los Angeles, born and raised in Minnesota, like yourself, decided to come back here and kind of transitioned into the audio world, which has been really cool for me because it's a different genre, but it's kind of the same feel, and I'm dealing with the same stuff. And it's just really exciting to learn a lot of new stuff. But I'm highly proficient in digital marketing, social media, development. I help a lot of businesses and nonprofits kind of just establish their online presence and figure out how to generate online revenue. So I've been able to work at Studio Americana and work with a lot of really cool people like you guys. And Ian is just a fantastic boss, and I've learned so much.
Awesome. Fantastic. So Ian, specifically, let's talk Studio Americana. Let's talk the early days, when it started, how it started, what kind of gave you the fuel, the fire to start this whole production up? What was the inception point, would you say, where you said, you know what, I'm going to break off, I'm going to start doing my own thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, you want it to be like this one pivotal moment. And I think, there were a few choice moments, I'll say, along the way that really said, this is the direction that you should go. But, like I said, I had been doing this for 20 years. I had been, for a long time, for at least a dozen of them, was a music DJ. So, it was a lot of fun. And then, I transitioned into doing more like news talk radio and behind the scenes stuff of that nature. And I was doing an on-air show at the time and just thought, there are so many other great voices that aren't my voice, right? It wasn't, I don't think my voice doesn't have value or something, but I'd been doing this for a long time and just thought, I have met so many people that say, radio is just this amazing thing. And I wish I had, had this opportunity to be in radio, and I still have this passion for it. And I just see that being able to manifest in podcasting. And it kind of culminated that I said, I've been doing this as me for so long. I would rather, and I know there's so many people that want to be able to do this sort of thing. So what if I could provide that opportunity for them? And I think, just like funny enough, any kind of industry, after you're in it for a while, it doesn't really have the same, pizzazz that it used to, even if it's kind of a cool one like radio. And so I was just kind of ready for something a little bit different. And at the same time, just seeing these opportunities that, especially and very specifically, I think nonprofits and businesses being able to do podcasts, whether it's internally, whether it's externally. At the time I thought of this, it wasn't really happening in any sort of robust way, but I knew it was going to. It just seemed very like that's where all the trends were going. And here I had the skill set, and I was not, I was kind of looking for something different. And I don't know, I would say it was over about a 4-month period that it happened. And I had these series of conversations with my wife about it, and we, kind of got to this point where we said, we can't not do this. We canceled a trip to Europe and said, we're going to plan to start a business. Wow. So that was that day, and that conversation was certainly one of those pivotal points. But it was over a little period of time. Once that idea, what if I did this for other people, happened, and then it just grew and grew and grew to the point where we said, forget everything else, we're going to do this. So
that's amazing. And what was the initial kind of foundation building process like in terms of, did you lay out a business plan like, okay, I need to get this equipment and that equipment, find a studio space back when real life recording was a thing? Yeah. Kind of what were the really early days of building that business and getting those blocks in place to get a client base?
The physically building it part was so fun and exciting. Like, I was making spreadsheets of what equipment we were going to do and how everything was going to connect to everything else. And it was this, very, one of my first employees does like boom mic operation for Hollywood movies and Netflix movies and all that. He left us to go out to New York and do that. But at the time,
what a traitor.
Yeah, well, he was such an audiophile. I mean, this guy was an audiophile of audiophiles, and was always just rolling his eyes at the combinations that I was putting together. Not because they were wrong, but just because I just had this very specific way of how everything was going to be physically put together. So I love that stuff, and I put all sorts of time, and a lot of my, I think a lot of the fears and apprehension of starting a business, I kind of put by the wayside and kind of focused on the joy of doing that sort of stuff in that moment. But it took, 3 months. We found through some of the connections I had in radio, we found it was actually the former KQRS building in Golden Valley. And it was admittedly the first place we looked at the interior of. I had done some research and we had driven by some places, but it was the first place we went to. And I hadn't had this idea of radio stations at the time as the next place, but I guess it's so much in my blood that I got in there and I said, well, yeah, obviously this will be where we build our studio, because this is the comfort zone for me. I've been in radio studios for 20 years. So let's do this one. And so, so I think that part of it was, there were certainly stresses involved in doing it, but it was fun to be building that. Everything was still yet to come. But then I would say opening day, it was kind of the day I realized that, if you build it, they will come. It just doesn't work exactly like that.
Kevin Costner lied to us? Are you kidding me?
2 weeks ago, I drove by the Field of Dreams in Iowa. So
Whoa.
Nice. Yeah.
Very good.
So that is exactly, at the same time we had made the decision to start this business, we also made the decision to start a family. And so my daughter and first child was born 2 months after we opened our business.
Ooh.
And
That's a lot of new at once.
It was supposed to be 3, but it ended up being 2. And yeah, so I think then, those first 2 months were kind of, it isn't as though nobody showed up right away. I started pounding the pavement. I got into very, new places, new challenging places that I, as a, longtime radio person, not in the sales department, not in the marketing department, was very unfamiliar with. So I had to do, had to learn a lot of skills really fast as far as, how am I going to get people in here? How do people understand what it is that we do? Because that was another challenge is, I wouldn't say this service has existed, but in the way that we were putting it together and the kind of processes and long-term picture that I had of what this business was pretty new. And so it wasn't like I was, hey, there's a new McDonald's on the, on this corner, throw some signs out the window and people will come. It was, so how exactly does this make my podcast easier? What do I need to do? What do you do for me? All that sort of thing. And, I just admittedly, had a bit of for a communications professional, had a bit of a difficulty communicating, I think, some of the intricacies of the business and how many things we can do and how easy it really was for people. But I would get into the details of why it was easy and all the things that we were doing, as opposed to saying, you can just show up and pretty much any project you want to do, we can take care of. So,
right. Yeah. So it's a matter of kind of simplifying for everyone instead of, I imagine someone not ingrained in the audio engineering world, their eyes kind of start to glaze over when you start to get into the nitty-gritty technical side of things. But when you do say something like, hey, if you need an audio project, you can come in, we're going to sit you in front of mics, you do your thing, you talk, right, and everything else is handled for you.
Right.
Well, and Alex, you've been in the studio.
Yes.
You've gone through the process of coming in, sitting down, talking to the mic, and you understand how easy it is and how simple Ian and Studio Americana really make it. And you know that you're going to end up with a quality product that you can push out to your listeners that's going to be consistent and the same every time. And so much of the time and energy that Ian has put into the business is finding the right equipment, figuring out the right formula for someone to literally just come in, sit down, and know that the product that they're going to get back at the end of the day is professionally done. It's high quality audio, and people just love listening to it. One of the things I've noticed in the past X amount of coronavirus months is a lot of the audio on commercials, TV shows, everybody's working from home, everybody's filming their own stuff, and they're using like Zoom audio. Forgive me, but you can hear the difference in, that's one of the things I've learned from Studio Americana. I now hear the difference in quality of audio in everything that I listen to. And I always was focused on high quality audio, but with Ian, it's like, you're talking like he goes into outer space with some of the specs about what he's capable of doing and the product that he's able to turn out. And that's been fun for me to watch. And my role has changed. Now I get to help with the audio because we no longer have the physical studio, but it was so cool. I got to meet so many different kinds of people with so many different kinds of podcasts that are absolutely amazing. I know more about horse care, cultural issues in Minnesota, tech in Minnesota, Minnesota architecture, all sorts of really crazy, awesome stuff that I would have it would just gone over my head had I not been involved in this business. So that's one of the really cool things about Studio Americana, in my opinion, is the capability and the people it really brings together and the message that it's able to share on like a grand scale. I even know like now about dental care. I was like, not a dentist, but I could tell you some interesting stories about dentists.
And we'll get back to the kind of switch from doing things in physical space in the studio to that transition into COVID era business, which is a crazy thing to wrap your head around. But John, when did you start with Studio Americana? And you've kind of mentioned how your role has kind of evolved over your tenure there, but can you just talk a little bit more about kind of, you were coming in with a video background, you said, and kind of like a digital marketing kind of background. So how has your role evolved over the course of your tenure with Studio Americana, and what are the kind of key takeaways that you've learned along the way?
My neighbor's mowing their yard. I apologize. I also have a puppy in the background. If you see me like looking around trying to get things out of his mouth. Well, I started at Studio Americana as the operations manager, and also did a fair amount of kind of social media work and development, and just kind of figuring out what was working with the websites and not working with the websites, and figure out how we could do a better job just to bring in more clients. I owned I would say, pretty highly successful production company for 10 years. Did video for a lot of different reasons. I wanted to leave that behind me and just shift gears and really work for somebody else. So as the operations manager at Studio Americana, I would come in the morning, kind of set everything up, turn everything on, get everything ready to go for all the people that would be coming in throughout the day and recording their podcasts, which then would include, meeting the clients at the door, meeting their guests at the door, bringing everybody in, sitting them down, talking them through the entire process of recording a podcast, what to do, what not to do, working on show logos, just a lot of pretty much everything related to operations, client management was my role.
I was pretty much like, hey, can you do this also? And hey, can you help with this? So yeah, I think we had the role designed as kind of one thing, and then we're a small business, and John was really willing to like jump in and be like, what else can I help with? What else can we do? So yeah,
that was really cool, and I loved it. I got to meet you, Alex, got to meet Jack, got to meet Kevin, got to meet so many people that just have really great podcasts. I actually recommend a lot of the studio podcasts. People who like ask me, they're like, "Oh, what do you listen to?" I'm like, "Well, like the African American Leadership Forum is great. techdotmn is great." Like we have all these really, really cool podcasts that you learn so much about. And then that kind of ceased in March. The operations part of it kind of got in a bind. So then I was now currently still am transitioning over to an audio producer role. I'm actually recording the show in the background, making markers, listening to audio, adjusting levels, making sure everything's going smoothly, for you guys, the client, and Ian. And it's been really cool. I've learned a lot in the last 3 weeks about equipment, and remote recording and connecting with people on Zoom that I didn't know about, which, it's just a lot of really good skills to learn. And that's really kind of where I'm at right now. And then we're just going to start back up with social media, our online presence, to get that going. So that's something we're diving back into. But my main focus now has been audio producer.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because I think for the hosts or the guests that come on and sit in front of a mic and talk and are actually actively participating in the show, and this goes, I guess, for any type of entertainment or any type of media, the behind the curtain stuff that goes on is much more extensive than I think anybody realizes. So over the course of a recording, what are some of the things that are going on in the background that people might not notice that help turn a podcast into sounding like a quote unquote like amateur affair to a professionally produced product?
Sure.
Okay. Well, you want me to start, Ian, with maybe with what I do, and then kind of transition into what you
Sure.
with
Yeah,
like
sure.
the product that the producers turn out. So, having an audio recording kit with the right microphone, the right cable, the right recording device, and then remotely connecting to clients through Zoom, and then is kind of like step one, and making sure that all sounds good and everything's working together. So a lot of the background there is just getting the right microphone, the right pieces of equipment to the right people, and then connecting. Then, you as the podcast host will develop the show. You'll have the notes. You'll do pretty much all the talking. We'll log in. We'll set up the show. And then we will just fade into the background. We'll turn our cameras off. We'll turn our mics off. We'll listen to the show. We'll fire up the recording equipment on our end, and we'll log the audio. We always have a couple different recording things going. So we have backup audio. We have the actual audio. And then in my role, I will mark. I'll start the recording. When you start talking, I'll put markers into the audio timeline saying this is when the show starts. We have 30 markers in one show. If someone says, if there's pauses, if there's heavy breathing, if someone bumps the mic, anything like that, I will mark all of and listen to and mark all of the editing changes that need to be made. And then I will send, that's where my role kind of ends. I wrap up the show, say thank you, log everybody out. I digitally store the audio, and then along with all the other producers here, I'm not just the only producer. We've got Mike Branson and Brian as well, and somebody who is newer that I'm not familiar with. And then I will send it over to Ian via Dropbox, really. And some clients like to use WeTransfer, any sort of file transfer website. That's how the audio goes from the producer to Ian, and then that's where the audio engineer takes over.
That's where the magic happens, as it were.
And as you can hear from John, we've made a very involved process, right? I mean, this has been something that I've developed over, the 3 years that since we've opened, and I think we'll continue to develop as long as the business exists, right? I think, we're always looking to make it an easier experience for people. It's fairly involved on our end for that very purpose. Like you said, Alex, I mean, there's more that goes into it there's more that goes on behind the scenes than what you hear in that final episode. And it really depends, for us, it really depends on who the client is and what it is that they're looking for. And that's where it got a little more, a little more simplistic to just say, pretty much whatever project you have, we can handle, because some people want to record, some people it's about the quality of the recording. Some people it's about having someone there to make sure that everything runs properly, can get guests loaded up, can clean up the audio in post. And, again, to that kind of initial idea of what makes a professional podcast or a podcast sound, more polished, it can be things as simple as the music that's at the front and the back, and having a little bit of a pre-recorded content with it. And, a big focus for us in that post. So after, John or any producer sends us the audio, is that the episodes all sound the same next to each other. So you're listening to episode 3 and then you listen to episode 52. It's not going to sound, you're not turning your volume up and down on your device. And I think, helping people clean up things that just, I think Josh talked about not, keeping things raw and clean in the way that they are meant to be. I think that's really important. But as you mentioned, behind the scenes, sometimes there's something that happens for 4 minutes where everybody breaks and they're like, wait a minute, we got to regroup and figure out, how we're going to bring this back in. And those things sort of happen. And I think coming from live radio, I wish that could have happened. I wish I would have had a lot of those opportunities. And I think being able to offer that and say, you've got this hour, 2 hours of time period to record any number of episodes, and you don't have to be on the whole time. We can, this can be casual. I think just being able to offer that environment has been, what I realized our company is, right? I think I kind of knew that, in a way going in, but I didn't realize how completely that was what we were.
And so much of the feedback I got as the operations manager when the studio was functioning was like how comfortable the process was, how easy the process was when people came in. Ian also did a great thing with a couple employees. He kind of had them sit down and record a podcast too, so you could hear yourself, you could go through the process, you understood what it felt like to sit in front of the mic, and that helped me connect with clients and the guests and walk them through kind of the expectations of what was going to be required by them in the podcast, which is really, really minimal. I mean, Ian did a really, really good job of just streamlining the entire process and just making it simple and comfortable for the user.
Sure. So that smooth process and that welcoming environment, like so many other businesses, was kind of turned completely upside down in March, April, whenever it was, who knows anymore?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, Alex, and it's funny we're recording this right after this Woodward news came out. But
Yeah.
I had been watching Chinese and Italian news media in late January, February, and something really struck me that this was very, very serious. And so I guess I think I just kept my ear to the ground to it for a while, but I don't remember exactly what the day was, but March 11th was the day I said, okay, we're all not coming in the building anymore. We're going to, I didn't know at the time what we were going to do, but we'll figure it out. Our landlord was kind enough to let us, kind of sit on it for a little while. We paid a few months that nobody was in there, but so many people did. And that's just been the reality of all of this. And then a few months went by, and well, not even a few months. I think early on, I was just, my wife is a professional accountant. We have a toddler at home. I can't even describe. I still can't really describe what that all feels like. And I know so many other parents do and have more kids, and being alone right now. I mean, everybody is in their own unique situation, and ours was the 2 working parents and a toddler situation, and I had to deal with that first. I had to figure out how do we make this kind of work, and it was we're still making it work, but at that same time it was also how this is podcasting. This isn't something that has to have a studio. How can we offer that same professional quality to people? Because all of our current clients and new clients were still coming to us saying, hey, we still want to do podcasting. What can we do? So I put together these kits, basically these remote studio kits, and started learning about courier services and really learning Zoom and Google Meet and all of the different things that we all were learning at the same time. And it quickly became apparent that, this is something we can do. Interestingly enough, before COVID happened, before I was even aware of this, we had been talking about how can we decentralize this single studio and make this into, how can we expand the company and offer these services in new, different, and more expansive ways. And this wasn't exactly what I had thought of at the time, but a variation of it was already kind of in my mind. And so when all this happened, it was just kind of oh, well, we're just going to do this now. We're going to have to figure out how this particular remote version works. And I think it's going to evolve, as so many businesses are going to evolve over the next several years as well. You were talking to a previous podcaster about 2021, 2022. What do these years look like? And so I think, we're fortunate enough, again, to have a kind of business that's around a service that we can do remotely and still provide that high quality. But I think it took a lot of, I don't know, it just took a lot of nights thinking about it and what we're going to do. So,
and not to go too far into the future of podcasting, but you had a guest in one of your recent episodes talk about how most podcasts only go 3 episodes and then die out, and there's 30,000 podcasts. And, a lot of lot of the media outlets like talking about how many podcasts are out there, how oversaturated the market is with podcasts. Everybody's got a podcast, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, but there's like 1 billion listeners. So the room for growth to have a podcast, if you have a good show, you create really good content and you put it out on a regular schedule. I mean, the sky's the limit for people who are knowledgeable. And somebody also recently talked about experts. Like if you're an expert in your field and you have information to share with people and done properly on a podcast consistently, I mean, you like, geez, I don't even know how much Joe Rogan recently sold his podcast for, but it was, that's my puppy, hundreds of millions of dollars. You signed a contract with Spotify. I mean, that's the pot at the end of the rainbow of gold, but you can find your way across that rainbow in so many different ways, in so many different directions. You really, really can still create something special and share with people.
It seems like a good opportunity to announce that the Tech.mn podcast just signed a deal with Spotify for $1 trillion. So,
wow, that is. I'm glad I got here for that, Alex. I'm really, really glad I got to be the guest on the show at that time.
Yeah, not to supersede any conversations, but let's talk about the kits that you are sending out to people for your clients. Having people come into a studio, you have full control over how things sound. You can tell them, oh, can you speak into the mic a little bit more? You can make mic adjustments. You can do anything you want. Taking that out of your hands and giving that to someone else removes a lot of that control.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the process of trying to maintain that level of quality that you've become known for and that you've set for yourself when so much of that control is out of your hands now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I will say, just a side note here, as people have probably noticed in the podcast, as John is transitioning into this audio production role, one of the things, and kind of to your question as well, one of the things we're grappling with specifically at John's location is his microphone right now. We're dealing with some stuff on his alone. So these sort of things, I surprised him right before we started this and said, hey, come on the show. So he didn't know that we were going to have to be doing this. But for our, that question of the control is, it's so, it was the question in my head, was how, now that this is gone, I mean, I loved building everything because I was creating this environment and, I had control of the environment in that I had created the most soundproof spots that I could to create, the best final product that I could. And I took a lot of pride in that. So it was, it was one of the primary questions was how can I, how can I even deliver something like that? And what it kind of came down to was actually, if I put this together with this and this with this, then, this preamp combined with this specific microphone that has this specific pattern. So, for instance, all of our microphones are dynamic microphones, which means that they, there's condensers and there's dynamics and whatever. It means that they don't pick up everything around you, basically. And so the kits that we send out to clients are these dynamic microphones that are also a supercardioid pattern, which means that it picks you up really nice on the microphone. This is what I'm talking on right now is a supercardioid dynamic. It's a different one than what we send to clients, but I mean, it's the same, kind of mic. And so, those kind of specific details then along with the fact that we can do it over Zoom. So we actually have a visual element we didn't have in the studio. When we were in the studio, it was set up where, as it was intended to be like your own private spot. And the producer was there over headphones, but you weren't in the room. You didn't have to, it was like the whole, that was part of the environment was like, you are, this is your spot during this time. And, but it meant we couldn't see people. But now with Zoom, I can see people. So I can say, hey, Alex, I need you to bring the microphone just a little bit closer to you. And then in the recording process, I don't want to get too deep into how we do all of it just because it's not all that exciting, but we're sending out these recorders that we then bring back to us, and we physically take them off the recorders so that, you know, people can just unpack it, pack it back up. You don't need to deal with it. But
they're like little Zoom.
yeah, a little
Not-
Zoom, exactly.
Yeah.
Not the
Not Zoom streaming, but
Yeah.
Zoom audio stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then and specifically with these microphones attached to them, so we know I've already kind of built that part of the environment, I guess, is the short of what I'm saying. Is these kits allow me to kind of control that environment right around the microphone itself. And because of the style, because of how I've put them together and what they are, and we even go into all these little Zoom units and like mess with all the settings to make sure that it's like this very specific way. And that also makes it so regardless of what room you're in, if you're on the mic well, you're not gonna hear that big sound of the open room.
Right.
And that itself brings you to like the top 10 to 5% of podcasts that are out there, right? I mean,
yeah.
you are jumping a huge chasm by taking these kind of steps. And then, you know, because I'd spent these 3 years in the studio figuring out the process for how we can give the end user the best experience possible, there was already a template for how we do this online. It just required a little bit of tweaking here and there, and voila. I mean, you know, we have actually grown since COVID. And for a physical studio,
Right.
one location, as we speak right now, I have another one of my employees is doing another they're hosting another podcast. We couldn't do that in the studio. So
That's fantastic.
It's been that aspect of COVID has been amazing.
Yeah.
The rest of it, you know, I would flush it all down to not deal with the rest of it, but I'm very grateful we're here. So
I will just say, too, at that point, Studio Americana, Ian's ability to, transition from radio 20 years ago through the coronavirus. He has a long gap, but his ability to streamline, change, adapt, thrive, and grow is next to none in the ability that he runs the studio, like he said. So that's great for us. It's good for the employees. It's good for everybody, but Ian does really do an amazing job.
Awesome. Yeah, there's no good time for a global pandemic. No. I've always said that, and I maintain it. But given I'm really into music, and it's amazing. My brother bought a Zoom recording. What was it, like a 16-track thing or something like that back in 2002 with a little drum machine on it and everything. I think it cost like $1,300 and it sounded like garbage. At the present time it didn't, but within a few years it sounded like garbage. And now someone can make a hit record in their basement with a laptop, and with a decent mic and a laptop, they can make like an amazing sounding song. And I imagine that's kind of the same thing with podcasting now, where no one, I doubt you would ever want to go through this pivot necessarily and want to go through this change, but with the technology available to you, it's probably never been easier, historically speaking, in terms of like audio quality and technology. So it's just amazing to think that 10 years ago, that probably would not have been possible to be able to send that stuff out to people and do all that kind of stuff.
No,
at least not as easily.
No. And even 5 years ago, I don't think the business that we are and we're looking at would have, maybe it could have existed at a certain level, but we had to, the wave of podcasting in general, forget our presence at all, has been a huge part of how, we've been able to build this business, is because, it's now a very legitimate format. It's not, I think some of the 2-hour basement conversations that were, kind of dominant in the 2000s and things like that. There's just a lot more practical application for it now. It's a part of, the media sphere in a very large way, even larger now with COVID. So, I think, again, I feel just very fortunate that a lot of those things have aligned, and to be able to have this process already built out before having to go remote is a big deal as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. All right, gentlemen, we are entering the twilight of the episode and the twilight of the live podcast booth in general for today. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. And for all your work behind the scenes. It's been enormously helpful. If each of you, for someone starting a podcast, if they want to start a podcast, what would be your number one piece of advice for them besides emailing Studio Americana?
That wouldn't be my first piece of advice, to be honest with you.
Please call.
No. My first piece of advice, I think, would be to, just, I mean, it kind of depends on what their headspace is and what they're looking to do. I am getting a lot of wobble on this webcam. I think it would just be, do it with a friend, right? Start it, do it with a friend. I mean, if you're sitting in the same room, which I know is a little bit different these days, or whether you're just doing it over Zoom, do it with a friend so that you can just know what it feels like and decide, hey, is this something I want to do? And then, I think one of the other very early questions, at least, is know who your audience is. Because if your audience is just you and your friend, and that's what you want to do, awesome. But make sure your expectations match what that audience is. If it's a podcast for you, I'm all for it. Do it. But if it's a podcast for other people, if it's intended for an audience, then be very mindful about who that audience is and put a lot of your energy in connecting to that audience and understanding what they want. That is where you're going to get that is what makes successful radio. And that's what makes successful podcasts. That's why I love the two of them, because it's really not any different, except podcasting has like no rules. So it's pretty awesome.
It's the Wild West.
I would kind of just echo a little bit of what Ian said. I would say you have to be passionate about what you want to do. I mean, yeah, if you want to grow a podcast to generate revenue and share a message, that's all great stuff. But you really have to care about what you're sharing with people, and understand what you're talking about. Like you said, you have to understand your audience a little bit and figuring out who that is. But then would also say that, recording, 6, 7, 8 episodes in advance before you decide to launch is a really good idea, because you'll have a lot of different, you'll know a lot more about podcasting the 8th time around than you do the first time around. And you can kind of mix and match episodes too. So you could post maybe your 8th episode might be the first episode you ever post because it's your best one. And then this is Ian's piece of advice too. But then, you kind of figure out a system, and then also having a regular schedule, having techmn does an amazing job of always having fresh content available that's been pre-recorded to share with people. I think it's really, really important to post consistently, can post regularly, and establish a schedule for listeners that they can easily understand.
Fantastic. Ian, John, thank you so much for joining. Everybody, thank you for listening and watching. If you're watching us live on Twin Cities Startup Week 2020, or a couple just general house cleaning announcements. We will be back live next Thursday from the same times, 9 to noon, with more guests, and the Thursday after that. So 9 to noon on September 17th and September 24th, 9 to noon. 3 guests each of those days. It's going to be fantastic. There's just a diverse line of guests, a diverse line of topics. It's going to be great. Also, big PSA. Today is the final day to vote for the Minnesota Startup Awards. Go to tech.mn. There's a banner right at the top. Vote for any awards that you want. You don't have to vote for them all, but vote for who you think should bring home the paddle at the Minnesota Startup Awards at the end of Twin Cities Startup Week. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week. Let us know what you thought. Always open to feedback, positive, nice, constructive feedback. I think that's important to say in today's world. And we will see everyone next week. Thank you so much.